It's time to stop balking people and bamboozling everybody with the Hebrew language. That's not the way to go. The ancient paths are not the Hebrew paths. The ancient paths are obedient behavior to Yahushua's instructions. It's got nothing to do with the Hebrew language. It just so happens that the Hebrew language was the language he was speaking at the time. And of course, at the beginning, that's his language. That's his language. That's the language he speaks. And in the beginning of time, everybody on the earth spoke Hebrew. So, but the point is, today we don't speak Hebrew. So while we look at words in Hebrew to understand, what they truly mean, because a lot of our language is just a mumble jumble, mishmash of sounds, taken from all the other different languages, and the meanings get a bit wishy-washy, washed up. So it's good to go back to the Hebrew language and look and see what we are to do and what the instructions really meant, so we get the pure lip. But the whole idea of having the pure lip is to behave it. The pure lip, remember we looked into it, the clean lip is about behavior. It's not about waffling off and confusing people with the Hebrew language, making them learn Hebrew. And this hit me like a ton of bricks yesterday. I was having a conversation with somebody, and it was just a light, off-the-cuff conversation, but inside me, it's like Yahushua, dumped a load of bricks on me, and I went, I'm doing this too. I'm bamboozling people with Hebrew. Why? It's like I said, it's one thing to look up a Hebrew word and then bring it back here and go, okay, well, this is what love means and this is how we should do it, It's not what we were taught, it's this. But then to have all these Hebrew names, and I'm not talking about the name of our creator and deliverer, obviously key of knowledge, Yahuwah, Yahusha, a deliverer, that's without a doubt the most important name in the universe. But I'm talking about all the other names of places. I know I told you I'm not going with the whole 𝗦𝗔𝕚𝕚 because nobody knows what that is. Everyone knows where Egypt is, so let's go with Egypt. It came up with me, I think, in this episode or the one before, in my mind, because it talks about Yerihu. Who? Yerihu. Who? Yerihu. Where's that? Jericho. Everyone knows where Jericho is and was, so let's just call it Jericho. I'm not going to call the Pharaoh Farrah Fawcett, flick out. I'm not going to do all that. This is the whole point of this translation, was to speak English so that people can grasp it and not have to walk. See, when you're reading something and you're flowing with it, and you might be receiving something amazing from it, and then you go, there's a word there that I'm not used to. There's a word there I don't understand. So now I have to break my flow of conversation or whatever feeling or word Yahushua was giving me. I have to break my flow because there's this annoying roadblock that I have to jump over, either look up or even just strain my memory to realize what it means. And I don't like all that. And yet I've been putting it in this version as well. All the names of places and things I've been trying to keep to the original Hebrew, and I thought, why? How many original Hebrew people am I talking to? No, I'm talking to English, colloquial, everyday people. That's who I'm doing this for. So I want to make it easy. So from here on out, I'm changing all the Hebrew words back to English. I'm keeping Yisrael because I believe there's a big difference between Yisrael and Israel, and the geographical place. But most other things, I'm going back. Moses, Elijah, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. I'm talking in English, all right? And at the beginning of each chapter, I'll just put in brackets what their Hebrew name is, if you're interested, all right? I thought they're not going to be turning in their graves. They're still asleep. They're not going to care what names I call them. They were more interested in the Besorah, in the message, the good news, all right? Besorah. Who knows what a Besorah is? Good news. We're going English, all right? So none of this weird, crazy things that people have to look up anymore. And if there is something that we come across, we'll put it in brackets. And we're going English all the way because we want the most important thing about the message, the blood covenant of deliverance, is that it exists outside of time. It exists outside of culture, language, so this same blood covenant of deliverance, this same deliverer could have dropped himself into any point in history and still been completely relevant, speaking in the colloquial language of the time, which he did, he happened to come into a time where there was the Romans and there was the Yahudim. What is the Yahudim? Judaism, that's what we're talking about. Yahudaism. What does that mean, man? You know? Judaism. From Judah. Judaism. So, see, I've got to train myself out of this now too. To make it easy for people. That's what we want, this deliverance. Not because deliverance isn't easy. The path of deliverance isn't easy. It's narrow and it's hard pressed. And there's pressure all around and there's a fire, a test bit of fire that you're going to go through. So the experience itself is hard enough, not because Yahushua makes it hard, but because we're just so riddled with filth and we've got to overcome it. The experience in itself is hard enough without having to put all these roadblocks and hurdles in front of people. So I'm not doing that. And I apologize if you found that a hurdle. I'm coming out of that too. So, and we'll backtrack later on and change all the text that I've done so far. English, all the way, mate. Because as far as I'm concerned, the only name that you really need to get right is the name above all names, which is Yahushua. So, apologise for that. Let's move on. So if you notice, I'm only telling you that because if you notice in the text, I've changed some things around back to how they were in the original BIBLE. That's why, because people's names and places and things like that, I know people want to say, oh, the scholars and the scribes and the interpreters were all anti-Semitic and they hated everything to do with Hebrew, so they've taken everything to do with Hebrew out of it. They've taken all the Yahoos out. Yasha, Yahoo, Yermi, Yahoo, all the Yahoos are gone. Well, you know what? That doesn't matter. There's only one Yahoo that matters, and that's Yahushua. Yahuwah and Yahusha. They're the only Yahoos that matter in this situation, so we've kept that. That's the essence, because like I said last episode, you can't carry around a secret diary with a key and then throw the key away and expect to have any kind of revelation just by carrying the book around. Which is what the Jews did. That's what the Jews did. So let's go on. I think we've hammered that nail in. Balaam blesses Yisrael. Then Balaam said to King Balak, build me 7 altars here and prepare 7 young bulls and 7 rams for me to sacrifice. So King Balak followed his instructions, and the 2 of them sacrificed a young bull and a ram on each altar. Interesting, the number 7 was recognized as a divine number and was used in rituals throughout the known ancient world. It was not just a Hebrew invention, nor something that belonged to Yisrael alone. I didn't know that. I thought number 7 was specifically to do with the Shabbat and the Shemitah years and that sort of thing, the cycle, Yahushua's cycle of 7s. Turns out it was a pretty important number worldwide. It recognized as a divine number. So then Balaam said to King Balak, stand here by your offerings, and I will go to see if Yahuwah will respond to me. Then I'll tell you whatever he reveals to me. That's what a medium is, as wicked as we know they are in Yahushua's eyes. That's what a medium's job was to do. Be like a mediator between you and the spirit world. Be a mediator between you and your dead loved ones. But that's a sham, because dead loved ones can't talk to you because they're either burnt up or buried, and their spirit, their essence in a person is asleep. So it's not them talking to you, is it? It's a demon. You're getting sucked in. People today who go to mediums are being sucked in. Anyway, he goes, wait here and I'll tell you what Yahushua tells me. So Balaam went alone to the top of the bare hill, and Yahushua met him there. Yahushua met him, this pagan witch. And Balaam said, I have prepared 7 altars and have sacrificed a young bull and ram on each altar. So Yahushua gave Balaam a message for King Balak, saying, go back to Balak and give him my message. So Balaam returned and found the king standing beside his burnt offering. Remember, I changed all the burnt offerings to ascending near offerings because it was a more accurate English understanding of what the Hebrew word meant. It wasn't just burnt, it was ascending near, to bring you near to me. Come on up to me, son, daughter, come near. Ascend near, just like the smoke is ascending, ascend near to me. I haven't done that here because these are pagans. They're not trying to ascend near to anybody. So they're just burnt. So they're not going to have the pleasure of this new understanding. They're just burnt. So Balaam returned and found the king standing beside his burnt offerings with all the officials of Moab, and this was the message Balaam delivered. King Balak summoned me to come from Aram. Yes, the king of Moab brought me from the eastern hills, saying, "Come and curse Jacob for me. Come and declare Yisrael's doom." But how can I possibly curse those who Yahuwah hasn't cursed? How can I condemn those who Yahuwah hasn't condemned? I see them from the cliff tops. I watch them from the hills. I see a people who live by themselves, set apart from other nations. I see a people who live by themselves, set apart from other nations. And that hasn't changed as far as Yahushua's bride Yisrael is concerned. We are a people who live by ourselves, set apart from other nations in our behaviour. Up until now, the Hebrew word goyim has meant nations. Remember I keep saying the word goyim? That's the word for nations. So up until now, this Hebrew word goyim has just meant nations in the general sense, and it could have even included Yisrael too. However, from now on, the word goyim will be a term that will only refer to the non-Hebrew nations. From this point on and for all eternity, the word goyim or nations can never be applied to Yisrael. Yisrael, the true Yisrael, are never part of the nations. They are not part of the nations. Who can count Jacob's descendants as numerous as dust? Who can count even a fourth of Yisrael's people? Let me die like the upright and clean. Yes, let my life end like theirs. So he's obviously seen something. You're right, it's right here. This is basically a reiteration of Yahushua's first promise to Abraham. A reiteration of Yahushua's first promise to Abraham that his descendants would multiply as the sands of the sea. Here, Balaam is expressing his desire in some way to be attached to Yisrael, and as a result, also partake of the blessings they receive from their Elohim. Yes, even this pagan sorcerer from the nations senses that Yisrael has been blessed and given privileges unlike any other nation on the planet. And of course, being human, Balaam naturally wants some of those blessings to rub off on him. We were talking about this yesterday. We were looking back at our journey and just seeing where we'd all come from individually and together, and just seeing the protection, the blessing that Yahushua has for his bride, and where we'd all come from, and where we are today. Even in the midst of a coronavirus, his bride is flourishing, if she's obedient. And this is the witness. This is part of the witness to the outside world. Without even opening your mouth, this is the witness that everything in your life works. There's no devastation. There's no, heaviness or, everything flows. Everything you touch turns to gold because Yahushua goes before you, opens every door, closes the ones behind you so nothing can come in and get you. So Balaam can see this about Yisrael, and he's like, oh, I wish I could get in on some of that. Then King Balak demanded of Balaam. So he's hired this dude. This was just like us hiring a wedding planner or a caterer for the Christmas party or Mother's Day. Where a big party, we're going to hire a caterer. This is just common dialogue to us, isn't it? Oh, we had someone come and help us with some caterers. They brought a barbie and they roasted a lamb and all that. The normal dialogue, wedding planner, parties, event management. Well, this guy, just as we would say those things normally, this guy didn't like his situation, so he's hired a witch. He's hired a diviner, a sorcerer, to come and fix the problem. And he's going to pay him big bucks to curse these people so that he can conquer them. And Balaam has just basically said, I can't curse these people because Yahushua is blessing them. So he's off his face. King Balak demanded Balaam, what have you done? What are you trying to pull here, man? I brought you here to curse my enemies. Instead, you've gone and blessed them. But Balaam replied, I told you I can only speak the message that Yahuwah puts in my mouth. In Scripture, we are going to encounter several fascinating glimpses of the outside nations' fascination with Yisrael and a burning desire to want to become part of Yahushua's chosen people. The whole mixed multitude joining Yisrael when they left Egypt is a perfect example of this. They weren't called. They obviously delivered. They might have been in a house that had put blood on the doorpost, but they were just, what's going on here? We want to be a part of this movement, this revolt. We want to be part of it. The meeting between the Queen of Sheba and King Solomon is another good example. The Queen travelled all the way to Jerusalem to meet King Solomon because she wanted to know the source of his renowned wisdom. And perhaps the most famous example is Ruth the Moabite, who was another woman from the outside nations who expressed her desire to become a part of Yisrael's blood covenant by proclaiming, "Your people will be my people, and your Elohim will be my Elohim." It's in Ruth 1. And let's not overlook the other mind-blowing coincidence between King Balak and Ruth. Both are Moabites. However, in terms of their attitude towards Israel, they were polar opposites. King Balak, the king of Moab, wanted to curse Israel, while Ruth the Moabite wanted to become one with him and receive the blessings of Yahushua's people. So there's always an outside fascination with Yahushua's people. They may not want to be part of it, but they want to get in on the result, and the result being health, prosperity, blessing, an overwhelming sense of shalom. Remember that word we looked up, shalom, which meant just in a general sense of well-being. Everything's working for you, flowing. It doesn't mean you don't have hiccups and stuff and things we've got to work through. We're all being trained, but we don't. When you're working in the general public, I mean, like I do, like you might, and you're meeting a lot of people during the day, you realize just how shot and shattered their minds are. The fabric of their existence is just held together by a thread. And you know, if one thing just happened, they would have a mental break. And every single second person seeing a psychiatrist now, which is more BS that they get fed. Everybody's so freaked out about the world. And that's even before any plagues or corona came along. Everybody's freaked out about tomorrow. What's going to happen? What's going to happen to my children? And so when somebody comes along who has just confidence, I'm not worried about that. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, wonderful. Why don't you try this? Why don't you try it? They're fascinated with that kind of confidence, fascinated with Yisrael. Doesn't necessarily it doesn't necessarily mean they want to be part of Yisrael, but they want the blessings. They want to feel that security, which is what's happening here. So that was his first message. This is the second message. King Balak's not happy with that, so he's going to do a bit of bartering. Come with me to another place so you can see another part of Yisrael. It's not all of them, but come on, you can at least curse some of them for me. So Balak took Balaam to the plateau of Sophim on Pisgah Peak, building 7 altars there and offering a young bull and a ram on each altar. Then Balaam said to the king, "Stand here by your burnt offerings while I go over there to meet Yahuwah." It was only Yahushua's words of truth through personal divine revelation to Israel that set them apart from all the other nations. For no one else knew him. No one else on the earth knew Yahushua at this time except Israel. And that's what made them set apart, knowing him, anointed by him, separated, blessed, protected by him. Unlike the outside nations, Israel no longer had to wonder how the world began, where mankind came from, or the meaning of human history, because Yahushua had directly given them that information in his word. No guessing, they knew the answers, just like we did. The rest of the world, because they rejected the Creator in the beginning, now live in perpetual darkness and are in essence worshipping the dragon, struggling endlessly to discover the meaning of life through their many false deities and philosophies, which all stem from Babylonian sorcery and the worship of the sun, moon and stars, Mazzaroth, zodiac worship. But for those who trusted Yahushua, his true prophets represented the end of magical omens, the end of divination. And Yisrael was just the beginning to learn this new reality. Yisrael held the portal, the doorway in essence, to understanding the fountain of youth, understanding eternal life, understanding life after death, which they didn't have a big understanding of back then, but understanding the meaning of life. So the outside nations didn't have this. That's why they were fascinated with Yisrael. All he's done is just gone and hired a sorcerer to curse these people, probably like he does all the time. And he can't even get that. Yahusha met Balaam and gave him a message saying, "Go back to Balak and give him my message." So Balaam returned and found the king standing beside his burnt offerings with all the officials of Moab. "What did Yahuwah say?" King Balak asked eagerly. And this was the message Balaam delivered. "Rise up, Balak, and listen. Hear me, son of Zippor. Yahuwah is not a man, so he doesn't lie. He's not human either, so he doesn't change his mind. Has he? He wasn't human at this point anyway, I should say. He's not human either, so he doesn't change his mind. Has he ever spoken and failed to act? Has he ever made a promise and not carried it through? Listen, I received an instruction to bless. Yes, Yahuwah has blessed, and I cannot reverse it. There can be no sorcery or misfortune against Jacob, and no trouble or divination against Yisrael. For Yahuwah their Elohim is with them, and he's been proclaimed as their king. Yahuwah brought them out of Egypt, and he's as strong as a wild ox for them. No curse can touch Jacob, no magic has any power against Yisrael. For now it'll be said of Jacob, what wonders Yahuwah has done for Yisrael. What wonders Yahuwah has done for Yisrael. These people rise up like a lioness, like a majestic lion awakening. They refuse to rest until they have feasted on prey, drinking the blood of the slaughtered. It's an interesting analogy for Yisrael. Consider they're not allowed to eat or drink blood. But anyway, then King Balak said to Balaam, "Fine, damn it, but if you won't curse them, you better not bless them either." But Balaam replied to King Balak, "I've already told you, I can only say what Yahuwah tells me." It's interesting, I'll go into this a bit later, about the way he's talking. The way he's talking. He's literally, like the donkey, being controlled to say these words, because he wanted in his heart to curse them and get a big payday. But when he opens his mouth and he talks to Yahushua and gets the words, he's literally forced at this point to open his mouth and say what he's told. So we come to the third message. King Balak said to Balaam, "Come and I'll take you to one more place, and perhaps it will please Yahuwah to let you curse them from there." He's taking him from spot to spot. Now he's on the third mountaintop. "Come and I'll take you to one more place, and perhaps it will please Yahuwah to let you curse them from there." So Balak took Balaam to the top of Mount Peor, overlooking the wasteland. Balak was very persistent and assumed that if Balaam cursed them from a spot where he wouldn't see so much of the population of Israel, he wouldn't be so intimidated, and it would be easier for him to do his job. Interesting. He wouldn't be so... See, he's bartering with him. He's thinking, he's got to have a line of sight, remember, to curse them. I curse you. You've got to be able to see them. So he's thinking, okay, if he can't see as many people, I might get a slimy, sneaky little curse out of him. But again, Balaam told King Balak, "Build me 7 altars and prepare 7 young bulls and 7 rams for me to sacrifice." This is a big ordeal, isn't it? So King Balak did as Balaam ordered and offered a young bull and a ram on each altar. By now, Balaam realized that Yahushua was determined to bless Yisrael. So he stopped looking for opportunities to curse them through sorcery, and turning, he looked out towards the wilderness where the people of Yisrael camped, tribe by tribe, and he surrendered to the plan of Yahushua, who then came upon him. And this is the message he delivered. Many have likened this kind of inspiration to the inspiration we now have and the inspiration the early assemblies had when they had surrendered and given over to the Ruach, given over to the Spirit of Yahushua. Whereas prior to this that we're about to go into, he's literally being force-fed words like the donkey. Yahushua's forcing him to say certain words because he's a pagan, didn't care, just wanted to be paid, want to curse these blasted people and go home. But now it says, he's surrendered. He's pretty much got into his thick skull that he can't curse them. So he's thinking, I might as well surrender. So he surrendered to the plan of Yahushua, who then came upon him. And this is the message he delivered. This is the message of Balaam, son of Beor, whose eyes see clearly, who hears the words of Yahuwah and sees a vision from 𝚹𝕖𝕙𝕑. Big difference in the dialogue, isn't it, when you give over to Yahushua? I see clearly. I see visions of 𝚹𝕖𝕙𝕑, who bows down with eyes wide open. How beautiful are your tents, O Jacob. How lovely are your homes, O Yisrael. They spread before me like palm groves, like gardens by the riverside. They are like tall trees planted by Yahuwah, like cedars beside the waters. Water will flow from their buckets, and their offspring have all they need. Their king will be greater than Agag, and their kingdom will be exalted. Yahuwah brought them out of Egypt, and for them he is as strong as a wild ox. He devours all the nations that oppress him. He devours everything that oppresses his bride, breaking their bones in pieces, shooting them with arrows. Like a lion, Yisrael crouches and lies down, like a lioness, and who dares to arouse her? Blessed is everyone who blesses you, O Yisrael, and cursed is everyone who curses you. Up until now, Yahushua has been literally putting his own words in Balaam's mouth, but now we're told that the spirit of Yahushua came upon Balaam, and then he spoke using his own words. Can you see the difference? In the first two messages, the words Balaam spoke were the exact words directly from the mouth of Yahushua himself. However, in this third message, Balaam is speaking his own words by the anointing of Yahushua's spirit. Speaking his own words by the anointing of Yahushua's spirit that rested upon him. It's like the speeches and teachings of Yahushua's followers in Acts. The words they spoke were still their own words, but under the guidance of Yahushua's Ruach. Many of the early prophets, like Balaam in his first two messages, literally had Yahushua's divine words placed into their mouths, supernaturally speaking for them, as the donkey did also. However, with Paul and the followers in the latter scriptures, they spoke their own words, but under the guidance of Yahushua's Ruach. Their words were filtered through their own minds, understandings, and cultures, which is what Yahushua wanted. His perfect word is filtered through their own experience, through their own minds and cultures, to reach other people, which is not to say that their words are any less valid. On the contrary, just like the bride today, Yahushua flows through any mouthpiece that will surrender to him. It's just more intimate and a privilege to give over freely and enter into the portal, instead of having to have your mouth hole jammed open and closed and words shoved in there to say because you're so stubborn and rebellious. It's much more wonderful experience to have Yahushua flow through you because you're being trained to give over. You're surrendering bit by bit by bit, and you just, if nothing else has any appeal to you, so you just want his word in you. You just want that anointing, that wonderful feeling of having him pulsing through you. So there's a big difference between Balaam's first couple of messages, which were force-fed, which Yahushua can do too. And that's why you might get a word from Yahushua through just anybody that's why you shouldn't cut yourself off from the world as far as information goes. You might get a word that's directly from Yahushua just through, because he's a spirit, he can talk through people too, just like demons can, through one of your clients or customers or somebody, and it just rings. It might be just something really practical, and it just, you can't get rid of it, so it sticks with you all day, and you think, wow, that was Yahushua. If it's positive and uplifting and instructing and teaching and training, yeah, it's Yahushua. Got to find him, catch him in your day. He's there all day, every day. You got to find him. So this is his third message now, and he just blessed them again. So King Balak flew into a violent rage against Balaam. He angrily clapped his hands together and shouted, "Oi, douchebag! I called you to curse these people, and you've blessed them 3 times instead. Now get the hell out of here. Go home. I promised to reward you richly, but screw that. Your Yahuwah has made your reward nothing. You want to listen to him? You get no payday. You want to put his word against our deal and lift him above our deal? You're not getting paid. Get lost. He's made your reward nothing, 0." But Balaam told Balak, don't you remember what I told your messengers? I said, even if King Balak gave me his palace filled with silver and gold, I would be powerless to do anything against the will of Yahuwah. I told you that I could only say what Yahuwah says. So yes, now I'm returning to my own people, but first let me tell you what Yisrael will do to your people in the future. And not only is he cursed, not only has he blessed Yisrael 3 times, now he's about to deliver a message for Balak. And this is Balaam's final message. This is the message of Balaam, son of Beor, whose eyes see clearly, who hears the words of Yahuwah and sees a vision from 𝚪𝕙𝕬𝕬𝕬. Many people think 𝚪𝕙𝕬𝕬 means Almighty. It literally means mighty Elohim of the mountain. And interesting that all these encounters, a lot of them with Abraham, and Musha, and now Balaam, a lot of encounters happen on top of mountaintops, don't they? He's the Elohim of the mountain. That's how they described him, because they still had lots of deities in their mind, and this was the Elohim of the mountain. Whenever we go up the mountain, he seems to be there. So, vision of 𝚪𝕙𝕬𝕬, who bows down with eyes wide open. I see him, but not here and now. Yes, I sense him, but far in the distant future. A star will rise from Jacob, and a scepter will emerge from Israel. What about this? This is similar stuff to what Jacob was saying on his deathbed about Yehuda. Similar about the scepter, about the kingship that's going to come forth. Well, this is a pagan sorcerer saying this stuff. A star will rise from Jacob, and a scepter will emerge from Israel. Both of these phrases can be referring to both King David, I'll have to change that. Both of these phrases can be referring to both King David and also Yahusha. It's interesting to note that in the ancient Middle East, kings were often referred to as stars. Did you know that? A star is born. It's interesting to note that in ancient Middle East, kings were often referred to as stars. That's why the wise men were following the star, because they believed this was going to be the king to release them from the oppression of the Romans. So, a star will rise. It's not going to be Lady Gaga. A star will rise from Jacob, and a scepter will emerge from Israel. It will crush the heads of Moab's people, cracking the skull of the people of Sheth. Edom will be taken over, and Seir, its enemy, will be conquered, while Israel marches on in triumph. A ruler will rise in Jacob who will destroy the survivors of Ur. Then Balaam looked over towards the people of Amalek and delivered this message. Amalek was the greatest of the nations, but its destiny is destruction. Then he looked over towards the Kenites and delivered this message. Your home is secure and your nest is set in the rocks, but the Kenites will be destroyed when Assyria takes you captive. Then Balaam concluded his message by saying, Alas, who can survive unless Yahuwah has willed it? Ships will come from the coast of Cyprus, and they will oppress Assyria and afflict Eber, but they too will be utterly destroyed. Then Balaam left and returned home, and King Balak also went on his way. End of story. Amazing, isn't it? Yahusha opens people's mouths to talk and closes people's mouths when he wants. And if you give over to him, you can have a wonderful experience knowing that he's using you and flowing through you. In the simplest of things, don't ever think, I'm nothing, I'm nobody, I can't be used, I don't know how to do this, I don't know how to do that. He can use anybody. Anybody can type in a word into Google and look up the meaning. Anybody can know themselves and go, what is my problem? Why am I feeling like this? Let me put it into one word, one sentence, and then one word. What is that word? Let me look up that word. Let me share it with everybody. It might help somebody else. Don't ever think that what Yahusha gives you is not valid. When you've seen the words that are coming up through the bride that I'm getting on Facebook, that are clicking right into this journey we're going on, to the scriptures, and people aren't reading ahead and cheating. No, these articles are coming up at the same time Yahusha's speaking to his bride. Because at the end of this part here, it's really positive, isn't it? Yisrael will be the conquerors and like a mighty lion, and Yahusha goes ahead of them. Who dares arouse her and go? It's all positive. Yisrael, Yisrael, Yisrael. Yeah, cheering Yisrael. And so look what happens now. Let me jump to this little green bit here, turquoise bit, because this explains King Balak was working behind the scenes to get Israel cursed. We know that. However, after he failed, there is a tradition, which I think sounds pretty good. Tradition from the sages that tells us Balaam suggested an alternative means to defeat Israel, since they weren't able to curse them. Apparently, Balaam suggested to King Balak to send the people of Moab, especially the sexy women, to the Israelites, with the ultimate goal of getting them to worship their pagan deities and thus achieve the ultimate goal of weakening their allegiance to Yahusha. The enemy knows where all your weak spots are, who they are about, where he can get you. He knows that. So they just had this amazing victory. Well, Israel didn't. They didn't even know this was going on. This is all going on between Balak and Balaam. But Yahusha had a victory. He didn't. He managed to get his people blessed instead of cursed. He thwarted the enemies from cursing them. So look what they do now. Moab seduces Israel. We can't curse them, so let's try this. While the Israelites were camped at Shittim, in the Acacia Grove area, some of the men defiled themselves by having sex with the local Moabite women, who then invited them to attend sacrifices to their deities. So this is their next ploy, you see. So the Israelites feasted with them and worshipped the pagan deities of Moab. And this is how Israel joined in the worship of Baal of Peor, causing Yahusha's anger to blaze against his people. Religious prostitution. This wasn't even about the sex. He doesn't like that. This wasn't even about the act of sexual intercourse that was going on, or the intermixing, or whatever it was. This was about the religious prostitution. That's the thing that religion and mainly Christianity and that blow out of proportion. It's always no sex before marriage and no sex this and no sex that and no sex. They're all real prudish, you know, like it's all about sex. They're so offended by sex and this, that. You'll find as you read scripture, it's a very, very sexual, sensual book. Yahusha is not offended by sexuality or sex as well. He's not offended like that. His main offense is you going off and worshipping someone that's not him, you know. And of course, at this time, and today too, most of the behavior that involved this idolatry was sexual. So the sexualness was tied up in the idolatry. But it's not just the sexuality by itself, you know. As we've been looking at in Leviticus, it wasn't even about sex a lot of the time. It was about the idols that were involved. It was about the sodomizing, which was based on idol worship too. So let's come out of this prudish, religious, Christianese, Christendom mindset that sex is bad, sex is evil, we can't talk about it, it's wicked, You know, you shouldn't be talking dirty. That's not how Yahusha wants. But I'm saying Yahusha's not offended by it. He created it. He created a good thing, you know, for procreation and also for pleasure. So it wasn't the sexualness of this and getting it on with the women that was so offensive to him, because in this day and age there was two different types of prostitution. There was temple prostitution, which was a big no-no to Yahusha, and there was common prostitution. Two different words, two different Hebrew words. One was Zohar and one's something else. But there's two different types of prostitution, and the other one, while maybe frowned upon by Yahusha, is not the ultimate plan. It seemed to be permitted, just like polygamy. That's not the ultimate thing, but it was permitted. So don't go thinking, oh, they're having sex, that's evil. No, they were allowed to do that. In fact, they had common prostitutes, and they had servant wives and concubines and everything. It was a very sexual thing was going on, just like it is today. But the point that Yahusha wants to make here is the religious prostitution was the focus of this feast. Let's put the focus where the focus needs to be. This was full-blown idolatry, which is actually the true scriptural meaning of fornication. We always want to talk about fornication being a sexual thing. It's an idolatry thing. Fornication is actually a spiritual thing. So Yahusha hates it. And just like we talked about in the last episode, it's all about the zodiac and the Mazzaroth, which is second nature to them. So he's fed up, seize all the leaders and impale them before me in the broad daylight. He said to Moses, seize all the leaders and impale them before me in the broad daylight. Then my rage will turn away from Yisrael. So Moses ordered Yisrael's judges, each of you must put to death the men under your authority who have joined in the worshipping of Baal of Peor. Even though the text says, in most texts it says hang them. I looked this up. Very interesting. I thought hanging them, that's interesting. String them up, hang them up, hang them. I've changed it because in Hebrew culture, any form of strangulation was seen as quite inhumane and wasn't even permitted as a way to kill animals for food. No matter how bad your crime was, obviously you're going to be executed, they never hung anybody. It was not their culture. But they did impale people, which is similar, because part of being impaled is you know, depending on how you hung up, your lungs give way. But not just strangulation. They weren't allowed to strangle their animals and they weren't allowed to strangle people. So that was interesting. So I've made that impale, which flows with the theme of scripture, doesn't it? Being impaled on a pole. And the other thing I want to make a point of here is Moses disobeys Yahusha. We just read straight past it. Oh wait, let me finish the black bit first. If a man, this is in Deuteronomy, if a man is guilty of a capital crime and is put to death and you impale him on a pole, you must not let his corpse remain on that pole overnight, but must bury him in the same day. So that's just a bit of proof there that they used to impale people. Anyway, back to Moses. Yahusha says to him, because Yahusha's furious, they're all off worshipping idols and getting it on with the pagan people. He says, seize all the leaders. Seize all the leaders and impale them. What does Moses do? Moses doesn't seize all the leaders. He orders Yisrael's judges, each of you must put to death the men under your authority who have joined in worshipping. He doesn't go after the leaders. Moshe's choice to be politically correct instead of being obedient brings a plague. Because in the next stone throw of text we find, there's a plague coming. Interesting. This is what I'm feeling about this. Like, he's just had the experience with bashing the crap out of this rock, and now he's like, oh, that's a bit, politically incorrect. I can't just go after. My life will be a living hell if I start going after all these leaders and telling them to be people to impale them. I'm just going to tell the judges just to impale all the ringleaders, all the people that are involved and who are doing it. If you're involved in it, you're dead. So he doesn't go after the leaders at all. This could be why a plague comes. There's a couple of pictures, just it's a little bit blurry, sorry. Pictures of the whole idea of Baal. The whole concept of Baal changed from culture to culture, but it was basically sun worship, B, sacrificing children, and there's some ancient images of it there. Some were big versions of it and some were small versions of it. And Yahusha hated it. Imagine he hates murder, he hates death. Imagine taking your children to offer them up for a healthy crop this season. I have to offer up my baby to Baal, Some have likened this image here to offering your child to Santa Claus, because you're really offering him up to, the same sort of Satan, handing him over to Satan for a blessing. So, interesting parallel there. It's easy to wonder whether these stiff-necked people will ever learn. However, with the exception of Moses, Joshua and Caleb, the first Exodus generation had all died off. We're not talking about the same people that were, back in the wilderness. They've all died off. So in a very real sense, we're dealing with a totally fresh group of people here who had obviously failed to learn the harsh lessons that had previously been taught to their parents. And this is so reflective of human nature, isn't it? We don't learn from history, do we? Moab wasn't an uncivilized or savage nation who deliberately sought to do horrible things to anyone who came near their borders. They were just regular folks with families whose existence was filled with all of the normal ups and downs we all experience. So when Moab approached Israel in a welcoming manner, Israel reciprocated likewise. But from Yahushua's perspective, Moab's religious system entailed worshipping various deities with Baal as their supreme chief deity, and he hates his bride bowing down and showing respect to the false deities of other cultures, even just to maintain a peaceful coexistence. Not on. He calls this whoring, and it's the true definition of fornication, because whoring or fornication within the context of Numbers 25 is referring to bowing down and worshipping other deities instead of the one true element of Israel. These acts are considered the worst of the worst, the most high-handed or intentional crimes of all disobedient behaviour in the scripture. What is? Whoring, fornication, spiritual idolatry, worshipping idols, drinking blood, sodomy, all those things, which is what they did at all these gatherings as well. These are considered the worst of the worst as far as disobedient behaviour is concerned. This is pure idolatry, and that's why Yahushua's response was swift and super severe. Go and grab all the ringleaders of all these people. So it wasn't even about the people, it's about the ringleaders who should have been looking out for them, and string them all up, impale them, I should say. Moses didn't though, did he? This is pure idolatry, and that's why Yahushua's response was so swift and super severe. This was a national rebellion, just like today in the 21st century. So will you go along to a birthday, a Christmas, an Easter gathering, just to keep the peace? Will we compromise like that? As Yahushua said, the easy, wide path leads to destruction. So you can see it's while we may not have the physical objects, we don't literally bow down to in our Western cultures anyway, we don't bow down to idols, do we? But we do bow down to the wealth, we do bow down to the holidays, we do bow down to Christmas, Easter, birthdays, Mother's Day, Father's Day, all that list in our last episode, all the pagan Mazzaroth, sun worship, zodiac constellation, sun, moon and stars, we bow down to it. Horoscopes, and people even go to soothsayers, palm readings, mediums, people who speak to the dead apparently. We still do it today. It's just not as barbaric and prehistoric in its imagery to us. It just seems normal to us because it's all glossy. It's in movies, it's in television, it's modern, so we don't think it's exact same thing, And Yahushua hates it. Remember, this wasn't about the sexual part of it, it was about the idolatry of it, which involved sexuality in most cases, but it was the idolatry that was so offensive to him. Obviously, his perfect pattern for life is one man, one woman, live a quiet life, shut your mouth, consummate with one another, and that's it. He permitted other things. He permitted prostitutes, he permitted concubines, he committed polygamy otherwise, but it wasn't his perfect pattern. It didn't make him angry though, like idolatry does. Idolatry just makes hot steam come out of his ears and gets him so hot and flustered. He wipes people out, he opens the ground up, he does things to destroy it straight away. People who do that. Can you see why possibly the world is going through what it's going through today? In his face. And he's bringing judgment. So this was interesting. Just then after what have we just done? He's just told Moses to impale all the leaders. Moses doesn't, of course. He just chooses to be politically correct instead of being obedient. So they just take everybody who was guilty, everybody who was getting in on this worshipping Baal, and they impaled those people. But just then, one of the Israelite men brought a Midianite woman into his tent right in front of Moses, right before Moses' eyes, and all the people, as everyone was weeping at the entrance of the tabernacle. And when Phinehas, Eleazar the high priest's son, Remember, Eleazar is Aaron's son, who's now the high priest. Well, his son. When Phinehas saw this, he jumped up and left the assembly, and taking a spear in his hand, he rushed after the man into his tent, thrusting the spear all the way through the man's body and into the woman's stomach too. He stabbed both of them. There's a picture right there. He goes and stabs them both. They're getting it on, having a good root, and he just stabs both of them. So the plague against Israel was stopped. I didn't know there was a plague. There's a plague happening. But not before 24,000 people had died. Wow. The people are dying by the thousands due to a plague Yahushua sent, and the rest are partying with the Moab nation like there's no tomorrow. Kind of like today, isn't it? People are dying by the thousands by the plague Yahushua sends, and the rest of them are still partying with the Moab nation like there's no tomorrow. Keep in mind that Moab and Midian had formed an alliance at this time. So as far as Yahushua is concerned, both the Moabites and the Midianites are Israel's enemies. Therefore, it was a disgusting insult for this Hebrew man to bring a Midianite into the set-apart camp of Israel, and parade her right in front of Moses, who was standing right there at the entrance to the wilderness tabernacle. What do we know about the varying levels of set-apartness, the radioactivity that comes from the portal? What happens to anybody who wasn't a chosen priest? They're frackled up. Moses and these dudes are standing right at the entrance of the tabernacle, right on the outskirts there. This guy brings a Midianite woman into the camp, not on the outskirts of the camp, into the camp, right near the tabernacle. So it's lucky he didn't just frackle up on the spot there. Anyway, this was madness, pure and simple, and demonstrates the level of perversion Israel had succumbed to. Phinehas, who was the priest in charge of the tabernacle guards, saw this Hebrew man and Midianite woman wander on by as if they didn't have a care in the world. So he saw them wander on by as if they didn't have a care in the world, and he was overcome by rage at the utter disregard for Yahushua's set-apartness. He grabbed a spear, probably from one of the hundreds of Levite guards stationed around the tabernacle area, and followed the Hebrew man and his new Midianite girlfriend to their tent. And while the couple was in the midst of having sex, he thrust his spear through their bellies. This was interesting. The belly is actually a Hebrew idiom for the reproductive organs. Ouch. And the whole idea being communicated here is that since it was through those sexual organs that the Hebrew man and Midianite woman disrespected, blasphemed. Remember what blasphemed means in Hebrew? It means assault. It means come up to Yahushua and whack him in the face. Literally, you're assaulting him. That's what disrespect and blaspheme means in the Hebrew. You're assaulting him. So since the sexual organs was the way this blasphemy occurred, it was by those same very organs that they would be executed. This shows us just how powerful and dangerous illicit sexual desires can be. Not how dangerous sexual desires can be. Illicit, disobedient, perverse, outside of the constraints and patterns and desires of Yahushua's natural way of doing things. Sexual desires, that sort of thing. So I say that because we've all come out of religious systems that have made us feel dreadful because of sexuality, and you can't think about that, and you can't talk about this, and you can't talk about problems or anything like that. You can't because of all this prudish, and yet look what they're doing behind the scenes. So I'm not saying all this perverse sexuality that we see in the world today is permitted. I'm saying the idea of sexuality and sexual desire itself is not wrong. You don't want to burden people with something that was made for them in the constraints of the marriage bed. So, what about that? Then Yahushua said to Moses, Phinehas has turned my anger away from Israel. I bet Moses was angry, because it used to be Moses who used to get the credit for this sort of stuff, interceding and being the mediator. Moses is maybe getting a bit lukewarm in his old age, I don't know. But look, it wasn't Moses that got all fed up and fired up, was it? Moses actually disobeyed him. oh, I can't go on after all the leaders. They'll make my life a living hell. I'll just tell them to impale the ones who are guilty. Anyway, there's a plague. These two start getting it on right in front of the tabernacle almost, in their tent. And Phinehas is furious, goes and stabs him with his sword. So Yahushua says to Moses, Phinehas has turned my anger away. Not you, Phinehas. From Yisrael being as passionate as I am. Phinehas has turned my anger away from Yisrael by being as passionate as I am. Some versions say zealous, ardent. Passionate means passionate. His behaviour was a demonstration of how passionately angry Yahushua is at this. So because of this, I've stopped destroying all Yisrael now, as I intended to do in my passionate anger. Now tell him that I'm making my special blood covenant of peace with him. And in this covenant, I'll give him and his descendants a permanent right to the priesthood. For in his passionate obedience for me, his Elohim, he has purified the people of Israel, making them right with me. What did that mean? Yahushua had just decided that because of Phinehas' obedient actions in defending his set-apartness, it would be he who would become the next high priest out of Eleazar's sons. Aaron's just died. He's handed the mantle on to his son, Eleazar. But as far as Eleazar's sons were concerned, it wasn't decided who was going to be the next high priest. And now it has been decided because of this behaviour of hating what Yahushua hates and loving what Yahushua loves. He's given this special favour, of being the next high priest when it's the right time for that to happen. The Yisraelite man killed with the Midianite woman was named Zimri, a son of Shalu, the leader of the family from the tribe of Simeon, and the woman's name was Cosbi. Cosbi! Hey, hey! The daughter of Zer, the leader of the Midianite clan. I don't know why we're told that. Anyway, then Yahushua said to Moses, attack the Midianites and destroy them, because they assaulted you with deceit and tricked you into worshipping Baal of Peor. And because of Cosbi, the daughter of the Midianite leaders, who killed at the time of the plague because of what happened at Peor. So go and attack them and kill all the Midianites because of what's just happened. So isn't it fitting that we finish this episode with this? What did Israel succumb to? Temptation. And it wasn't intentional either. Some think it was intentional. The king set out and sent all the seductive people into the camp. It could be just that they were making friends, as people in the world do. They make friendships with one another, and Israel wanted to intermix, and the people, maybe the women were really hot and easy on the eyes, and they wanted to get in on it, and so they were seduced. Because it's all spirits, remember? You've got to look at the spiritual behind it. Let's look at this temptation. What does temptation mean? Makar, a testing. Temptation is a testing. You can't blame the temptation. Oh, it was unclean, it was demons. It was the demon's fault. Yeah, that might be where it comes from, but you are being tested. You are the chooser. You're being tested either by men, judicial, or by Yahushua, careless. Temptation, trial. Trial, what does trial mean? Bakam. To test, especially metals. To investigate, examine, prove, tempt, try, trial. Abraham was tested to see if he would obey. All these men were tested, and women were tested. That's what this walk is about, a test. Not to see what you'll proclaim, what your lip service is, to see how you will behave when you are put under pressure. That's the bride Yahushua is looking for. So let's look at this temptation. Let's go to 1 Corinthians 10. Let's not test Yahushua, as many of them did in the wilderness and were destroyed by serpents. And don't grumble either, as some of them did and were destroyed by the destroyer. Because all of these punishments came on our fathers as examples, written as a warning to us, living in the end of the age, so that even those who think they stand strong will still watch out and be careful, in case they fall too. For no trials have ever overtaken you, except the common day-to-day ones, and Yahushua is so trustworthy, and won't allow you to be tested beyond what you're able to bear. Yahushua is so trustworthy and won't allow you to be tested beyond what you're able to bear. Because with every test, he always gives you a way of escape so that you can bear it. So, my beloved one, flee from all idolatry. Doesn't this wrap up this episode perfectly? Idolatry, being tested. Will you succumb to the nations just to keep the peace? Just to, not have any drama? Or will you stand with Yahushua? Doesn't mean you have to have massive drama, but will you do the right behavior? Will you do what Yahushua tells you to do? Because if you do that, do like that, there's a way of escape. Always gives his bride the way out. Whether you want to take that way out or not is up to you. That's your choice. So, this world is controlled by the idolatry of Nimrod's zodiac system. We are going to be put in the hot fire like metal, to be shaped and fashioned. Remember that was up in the Hebrew word? We're going to be put in the fire, hot fire like metal, to be shaped and fashioned into the behavior Yahushua wants us to manifest. Into the behavior Yahushua wants you to manifest. And it hurts to change. Remember, the fire is hot and he wants us to pass this test, his test, without complaint. And there will always be a way of escape. There is no way over the fence. We must go into the fire and endure the trials and tests he allows to befall us. The test that he allows to befall us. If you are going through a trial or a test, he is allowing you to go through that. You are supposed to go through it. So don't be throwing your hands up to the skies. Why? I can't handle this. I'm about to crack. No, you're not. Stand there. Sometimes the instruction is to do nothing, but just don't fall over. Just stand. Don't go back. Don't fall. Don't faint. Just stand there while the storm's happening. Just stand there. Shut your face. Just stand there. All right? Because when it's all over, then you can take your next step. All right? Sometimes instruction is to do nothing, but just don't go back. Don't go back to disobedience. Don't go back to, wicked behavior. Just stand there. And often the instruction is to say something or do something. So the bride needs to know that even though he chose us, there is no need to put our noses in the air, no need to grumble and complain. Remember, you are being tempted to see which way you will go. You are being tempted to see which way you will go. Yahushua doesn't tempt us, but he tests us. It's a very similar thing. So even when the evil comes and tempts you, within the tempting, Yahushua, instead of stepping in, will stand back and go, okay, yes, there is evil all around and I am protecting you, but evil still comes in and out, and you're being tempted. I'm going to watch and see what you do. And if we are on a slippery slope of failing, many times he will come in and rescue us, or help us and assist us like he does. But many times he steps back, depending on where you're at in your maturity and your walk. He'll step back and go, okay, let's see how you handle this, like he did with Job. How are you going to handle this temptation? He says in many places, I don't tempt people. He doesn't tempt us to do wrong. That happens from the evil, from the unclean spirits. But in that there's a test. Yahushua wants all idolatry burnt from our minds and hearts. The sooner we pass these tests and trials, the sooner we become his friends. The sooner we pass these tests and trials, the sooner we become his friends. So when you hear his instruction to act immediately, act immediately, because some will never achieve this relationship. Half the maidens were foolish, remember? And punishment. If you don't pass the test, there is punishment. Punishment, chet, a crime or its penalty. Fault, grievously, offense, punishment of sin. In Romans 2, whoever disobeys Yahushua's instructions will perish without them. having been judged and cut off by those very instructions. Interesting. Whoever disobeys Yahushua's instructions will perish without them, because it's funny, if you disobey the instructions, your deliverance, your lifeline is within those instructions. Remember the animal offerings, the redemption, the atonement, all those things are in his instructions. So if you disobey those instructions, you will perish without them as well, because the deliverance is in those same instructions. So you're stupid. And those instructions have judged you and cut you off. Got it? So you're disobeying the very instructions that are giving you life. Anyone touting a worldly mindset has imprisoned themselves for life without chance of escape. They have turned themselves into a being that is worthless in the eyes of Yahushua, because worldliness is complete idolatry and evil against Yahushua. Worldliness is complete idolatry and evil against Yahushua. Those who refuse Yahushua and hate him will be punished. We look back in history and we see the Hebrews being brought out of Egypt with miraculous miracles. They came to the mount but wouldn't go up, and we meet Yahushua. They wouldn't go up and meet Yahushua, keeping their idolatrous mindset and comparing it with the instructions Moses was given. They had no trust in Yahushua or his instruction. Because of their idolatry, they had to wander through the wilderness for 40 years because of their lies and hatred for him. But Yahushua was patient and kept punishing every one of them that wouldn't trust him, destroying that whole generation until there were only 2 left to go into the promised land. Scripture says Yahushua never changes. Yahushua never changes. That's been one of the best, amazing, most phenomenal privileges going through these scriptures with fresh eyes, is to see that it's the same being from beginning to end. It's the same master, bridegroom, creator. Our deliverer never changes. That's why we're not destroyed. Looking a little further back in history to the end of the Second World War, looking at time itself and Yahushua's patience in waiting generations out, we can see it's now 75 years since that generation fought the Second World War. And this is global. Yahushua said he will give men up to 120 years of life, particularly in our 21st century. People don't live over that much, do they? The Hebrews had the same amount of time as what the Second World War generation had, which most of them have passed. As it was with the Hebrews, the Second World Warriors have left behind their children and their children's children. Yahushua is rummaging through these last generations, seeking out those who choose the way of Yahushua. Everything we do or say is recorded by the angels. Everything we do and say is recorded by the angels. Scripture tells us that Yahushua waits man out and also shows them on their way through their imprisonment of their minds. He shows them that he is present in their lives and against their behavior. He shows them that he is present in their lives and against their behavior. Do you believe he shows that to everybody? Do you believe, even without any outside influence, Yahushua shows every single person that he is present and against their behavior? I think he does. He may not introduce himself and let them know of his true name, but he lets them know that he is present and against their behavior. And what they do about that, well, you can see, we can't see, but those are chosen and those are not. Those who follow that thought, follow that feeling, follow that idea that someone is present here and I'm not favored, he's against me. I need to find peace. I need to search out. Some people search religion after religion after religion after movement after assembly after religion after movement after assembly to find their way out. They're the people Yahushua's looked, the hungry people that won't stop until they've found Yahushua. There are many today, as there were in the time of the Hebrews, who hate Yahushua and work against him on purpose. Do you believe that there's some people who come into your day that cannot sleep at night unless they've done something horrible to another person? You better believe that. Scripture says that somewhere. Some people can't sleep at night unless they've done something wicked to another person. That's their whole purpose for being on this earth. people who hate Yahushua and work against him on purpose. These have been destroyed, and now on earth in our time, the same thing is happening. Yahushua has no intention of changing, and all disobedience against his instructions will be punished and stopped within each person's 120 years. It's just amazing. Seeing all the different ways people are dying today, many before their time and many age appropriately, 70 plus seems an average lifespan, doesn't it? How many people in your community have you told about Yahushua? Should you go out there and just start rattling it off? How many people have interacted with you? These generations on earth at the moment are refusing Yahushua and celebrating the 𝗪𝗏 lifestyle. Got to be so cunning. Cunning as a snake and gentle as a dove. Don't just go out there sprouting the name of Yahushua. The world hates Yahushua. So the best thing to do is to tap into Yahushua's mind, and if he wants you to tell somebody, he'll reveal it to you. Doing it online is an amazing way because he will lead people to it. You are making the world very small working online because people can connect with each other. And particularly social media and things like that, people who aren't interested in Yahushua don't join up to those sort of groups, do they? So it's better, I think, to work this way because you can reach somebody on the other side of the world without even knowing it. Tell me, is Yahushua working with men today and still punishing those that refuse? If things aren't working for you, maybe you should check your behavior with the 3 rules. Are you taking things personally, people say to you? Are you letting people have who they are? Or are you taking it upon yourself to declare, you are not to behave like that, you must repent, for the reign of Yahuwah is at hand. Is that our calling? That's what people wrap themselves up in, that great commission, don't they? As though it's their commission. Completely all about the self. We are reading ourselves into this text because it's for us. Yes, the text is for us, but it's not about you. That was what he told people to do back then. Go out and immerse people. We don't have to go out and immerse people. Yahushua draws people, leads people. We read that a couple of episodes ago. People were wanting to be immersed and the instruction was given to them. And they're on different sides of the world. Go and immerse. You can immerse yourself. You can immerse yourself. And, if we are called to help, we help. If we're called to lead, we lead. If we're called to write something, record something, say something, whatever. Then we go back in our hole, put our head down, bum up, keep working, keep tarrying on, not carrying on, tarrying on, all right? So, wasn't that phenomenal, guys? That was a journey today, wasn't it? Started with Balak and Balaam, then Israel fell into idolatry, tempted and tested. Did they pass the test? No. 25,000 people were destroyed. Look what's happening in the world today, guys. Can you believe this is happening? It's happening. That's long enough. Love you guys. Keep tarrying on, not carrying on, tarrying on. Love yous.